Listeners, you are tuning into Uncommon Awareness, and this is the second Friday of August. The third Friday of August. On the first and fourth, oh God, listen to me. On the first and third Friday of the month, we do something called Evolving the Species. This is our roundtable with my co-hosts, Dean Lloyd and Am Rosen. And Dean Lloyd, you can learn about him either by going to my site, drhurley.net, that's drhurley.net, hit the About button and the Roundtable, or his website, accutone.com. Am Rosen, you can also learn about him on my website, or you can go to his website, lifegame.com. And on these roundtables, we bring experts from all over the world to discuss their extraordinary practices and therapeutics, what they're doing that is really ahead of the curve, very progressive, brings a lot of opportunity to us in terms of our health care. And our guest today is Dr. Fred Shard, and he's a chiropractor that's been practicing in Bellevue, Washington, and he's been in active practice since 1978, and he's licensed in both Washington and Hawaii. His practice includes the use of both nutrition and Oriental medicine. He graduated from Western States Chiropractic College in Portland, Oregon, and attended the AmerAsian Acupuncture Institute in Honolulu, Hawaii. Dr. Shard has done field research for innovative product companies, including Klamath Falls Blue Green Algae. Love that stuff. Haven't used it for a while. You actually just stimulated my memory about that. Food Doctor SOD. SOD is an enzyme that is particularly helpful for our liver functioning, and as well as many other cellular functions, and Matal KM. He has researched and developed numerous non-needle acupuncture protocols involving microcurrent electricity and high-wavelength cold laser. Dr. Shard is a contributing author to a major acupuncture textbook that was published in 2003, and this textbook released a second edition in 2008. It's also been translated into Spanish, so he's having an international influence. He is presently working on a major literary work and video production called the Encyclopedia of Non-Needle Acupuncture Methods. This will be released in the next few years. He maintains a video website about health topics at fredshard.com, and it's basically FREDCHARD.com. But if you Google him, you'll find out that this is a man that's really having an extraordinary impact. He takes people from childhood on up all the way. He's got an extraordinary repertoire of therapeutic modalities that he uses, and we're delighted to have him on. So I just want to say first good morning to my co-host, Dean.
Good morning.
Am.
Good morning, everybody.
It's 5 o'clock a.m. Am's time, 6 o'clock Dean's time, and 5 o'clock Dr. Shard's time. And I just keep saying, listeners, tell me that there aren't really dedicated individuals out there in service to others that they would get up at this time of the day to... Okay. Am and Dean and Dr. Shard, are you there?
Yes, we are.
Yes.
Hey, good, I'm sorry, I got dropped. I don't know why. I just reconnected. Thank you, Alex, for covering that. Hello, Dr. Shard.
Hi. Very nice to meet you, Dr. Hurley.
Very nice to meet you. You do exciting and excellent work, and anybody that's really of interest to Dean and Am is of interest to me. I can tell you that. You know, when I was transitioning out of practice and into alternative modalities, enzyme therapy, this is what we're here to discuss, folks, today, particularly enzyme therapy. It wasn't a really well-established modality, but I did get into the raw foods movement. So I'm really excited to have you here to see that this has become something that is really, kind of taken into the mainstream of your practice. As usual, I now turn the microphone over to my colleague, Dean Lloyd.
Thank you, Lorraine. And
You're
yes,
welcome.
we are talking about enzyme therapies. When we think about enzymes, most people, when you mention it, they think about digestion. And what we'd like to do is lay a foundation on what an enzyme is, how it works. So, Dr. Shard, why don't you tell us what an enzyme is, please?
Okay, there are several things to consider with an enzyme. Okay, first of all, there are protein-structured molecules manufactured by the cell, which occur in all plant and animal cells. These protein molecules are made from amino acids, vitamins, and minerals. They are necessary for all cellular functions to occur, and in turn all physiological processes in the body to occur. They cause biochemical changes to occur, but they remain intact after completing a biochemical change. In animals, digestive enzymes are excreted in fecal matter. Some researchers feel that we are born with a finite number of enzymes, and that if we have exhausted our supply, we will prematurely age or even prematurely die. There's a direct relationship or correlation between low enzyme levels and someone being sick. Instead of saying, I'm sick, therefore my enzyme levels are low, the new paradigm is to say, my enzyme levels are low, therefore I am sick. Really, isn't that which is a way to think about that? Originally researched in the 1930s, identified at that time about 80 different enzymes. Today, more than 5,000 different enzymes have been identified. Now, this would be a totality of enzyme processes in human and animal bodies. Enzymes are very temperature sensitive. They become denatured, which means they're deactivated at a wet heat of about 118 degrees Fahrenheit and a dry heat of 150 degrees Fahrenheit.
All right.
Okay.
That was a really thorough explanation. Go ahead, Dean.
Exactly. And when you talk about how we can use them, we first have to know how they work in our body. Enzymes, when you think of them, I know that there's enzymes on the market right now that can take away odors for cats. But when you're using them with digestive uses or for pain and all these types of things that are common now, let's talk about that. Let's talk about what these enzymes really do, and we can talk a little more about how we can use them. But first, tell me what they do.
Okay, I wanted to paint a little bit a picture of the totality of what enzymes do, because it's pretty comprehensive. And as you were explaining, even getting cat odors out of things, there's even things so far afield as in metallurgy, and enzymes actually make changes in metal. But we're focusing on nutrition and bodily processes today. So in some ways, enzymes are more important than the air you breathe, the water you drink, the food you eat. Without enzymes, you wouldn't be able to breathe, drink, swallow, eat, or digest your food. You must have enzymes to help perform these tasks. Thus, enzymes are absolutely essential to life itself. In a larger view of things, enzymes are always at work around us. That fruit which has fallen from a tree and has started to rot, that's enzymes at work. That green leaf on a tree in the fall, which is starting to turn brown, that's enzymes at work as well. The old vegetables which are decomposing in your compost bin, that's enzymes at work. The decomposing body of the dead squirrel which just got run over by a car, that's enzymes at work. So just think about it for a moment. If enzymes don't help to decompose dead plant and animal matter, planet Earth would be littered with bodies miles high of plants and animals. Enzymes are at work even in our immune system. When our white blood cells detect bacteria in our blood, they will move alongside those bacteria and release enzymes to destroy the bad bacteria's cell walls. When you're young, you feel strong, you feel vital, you're on top of the world. You have abundant enzymes to burn. But when you're older, you get aches and pains, and your body doesn't recover as quickly from that workout. Even that spicy food which you once enjoyed now may cause you to have an upset stomach. These can all be associated with enzyme depletion. Enzyme depletion is associated with aging and chronic disease. Remember that the enzyme depletion is causing the aging, not the aging causing the enzyme depletion. There's an interesting paradox with enzymes in this regard. On the one hand, we seem to have a finite supply of enzymes, but on the other hand, each biochemical process has a specific enzyme created by the body for that purpose. Thus, an enzyme created by the body to digest protein is different than an enzyme created by the body to assist in breathing. In addition to the aging process, enzymes are depleted by excessive consumption of cooked food, fat, sugar, stress, environmental pollution, pesticides, and heavy metals. Other factors which deplete our enzyme reserves include living in a very hot or a very cold climate, being pregnant, and traveling frequently. The consequence of digestive enzyme depletion is twofold. One has a less effective immune system, and two, a person has poor and incomplete digestion.
Okay, excellent. Well, when you digest your food and you're not breaking the food down, you don't get energy from it. You don't get the nutrients from it. And enzymes are a requirement. Very often when we are assessing people who are, coming to us with poor digestion and we're not looking at enzymes, I mean, how many people are out there thinking, when they have the advertisement of the purple pill, for example, you're you're looking at how people haven't even been, for the most part, our public is just grossly unaware of how enzymes are useful. When you're talking about taking away stomach acid and people with poor digestion where they have allergies to foods, they have incomplete digestion. This would be a very common approach, with enzyme therapies. But we want to know how these enzymes work in our bodies, and why don't you pick up from where you were just explaining on what they're doing? How do they work in us so they make us feel better?
Well, this is true, and I'll pick up for a minute on something you were just saying. They make you feel better.
Yeah, they do make you feel better. I can attest to that. Dr. Sharp, to take our first break of the hour, and I have a couple of comments I'm going to make after we come back from the break. Listeners, this is Evolving the Species, our twice-monthly roundtable. In the beginning I said the first and third. I'm sorry, I don't know what was happening to me this morning. The second and fourth Fridays of the month are our roundtable, and we're so delighted to have you with us. Listeners, we're back. We just the Species. This is our twice monthly program with my co-hosts Ambrose and Dr. Shard, Dr. Fred Shard, and you can go to fredshard.com and find out. He's got a lot of video tutorials up. He's a really prolific. He's a renaissance man in the field of alternative health. And to sometimes break down. We talk among ourselves as though people understand some of what we're talking about. So I'm just going to throw this out there, Dr. Shard. Enzymes are essentially catalysts, and you brought up the idea that they're more important than nutrients or water. And as we really innovate and expand our comprehension and understanding of what's taking place in this brilliant machinery called life, we're pushing the envelope. We're making progress. We're bringing new modalities and new ways of healing and health to people. But I want to ask listeners to consider, what Dr. Shard is talking about is that he's talking about a class of molecular functioning, a physiological functioning in the body that really, without it as a catalyst, things could not take place. So I just wanted to recap a little bit, Dean.
Oh, very good. Thank you. When everybody breaks the food down in their digestion, it goes through the process. You eat, you smell the food, you chew it, it goes down into your stomach. These enzymes start taking place. And what I would like to have Dr. Shard tell us about is where do enzymes start to do their job, and how do they get produced in our body, and where they come from?
Okay, thank you, Dean. I wanted to explain just very, very briefly and actually how they're working, and I've covered this already somewhat in the definition. Their vital biochemical reactions are, as Dr. Hurley explained, are referred to as a catalytic process in chemistry. However, there's one thing that's really, really different about enzymes and is a very living quality for them. A catalyst is destroyed in that sort of textbook chemical reaction but enzymes are actually remain intact and can actually be used again, and I'll talk about that a little bit later. As I mentioned already, they're created for a specific purpose. So, say you're digesting protein, your enzymes there, it's passed out by your body. It could actually be used again. One other thing about enzymes that's very, very different than catalysts. Some catalytic reactions actually create quite a lot of heat. Enzymes create no heat at all. So it's a very, very, very interesting difference there. There are probably three basic kinds of enzymes, and they have to do with in our bodies in terms of where they're made, how they're made, and the task they have to perform. The metabolic enzymes are ones that run body processes. These are found in cells, organs, bones, and the blood. Metabolic enzymes are important to the growth of new cells and the maintenance of the body's many types of tissues. Digestive enzymes created by the body are secreted by the salivary glands, stomach, pancreas, and the small intestine. Digestive enzymes include proteases, that's for digesting protein, amylase, which digests starch, and lipase, which digests fat. In terms of the enzyme needs for each of these individual tasks, a healthy human diet would be composed of about 20 to 25% protein, 50 to 60% starches, and about 20 to 30% fats. Some researchers feel that up to 80% of our body's available energy is expended through the digestion of these food groups. Fat digestion requires by far the greatest energy demand. Abundant available enzymes that support the vital digestive energy expenditure. It's thought that since many food allergens have a protein structural base, that a person who has a strong protease capability will digest an allergen okay and won't have any allergic reactions, whereas a person with a weaker protease capability is subject to problems with allergens. Another group is enzymes which come from food. These are enzymes which help our bodies in two ways. First, food enzymes automatically assist in the digestion of the foods which they've come in as they pass through our stomach and small intestine. Food enzymes are the most abundant when food is eaten raw or is cooked only at low temperatures. Second, our body can digest food-based enzymes or enzymes contained in supplements and add their amino acids to the body's amino acid pool from which new enzymes are made. Foods which are rich in available enzymes include raw dairy products, raw meats, unrefined oils, raw honey, grapes, figs, avocados, dates, bananas, papayas, pineapple, and kiwis and mangoes.
Okay, we got a break coming up, and we'll be right back to talk a little bit more about more enzymes and health.
All right, listeners, we're back. We're here with Dr. Fred Shard, Am Rosen, and Dean Lloyd. I'm your host, Lorraine Hurley, discussing enzyme therapy. And Dr. Shard, thank you for elucidating. I made the comment that it's a catalyst. That, of course, was my biochemistry between a catalyst. The food enzymes as part of that triage. You group them into three things. And Dean, I'm just going to let you go from here, but I just wanted to remind us that we were on a list of foods with Dr. Shard, and I'm not sure if listeners were able to.
Right, and I don't know if we're going to be able to keep your signal here, Lorraine, but if we do have you, great. If not, then I'll be happy to continue on with this discussion because the enzyme topic, I think, is not very well understood, especially when it comes to how our bodies get energy or what enzymes are in food, to break it down. And this is what I'd like to bring Dr. Rosen in. Am, would you give us a bit of a comment on how you've used enzymes in your practice and what they do?
Well, yes, thank you, Dean. But first, let me point out, no panaceas, people. The body is biological. It never breaks down for no reason. But most people don't understand the logic of the body. And part of that logic of how the body processes is based on consciousness. A lot more to say about that, but since we're talking about enzymes, you know, in hunter-gatherer times, we go strip everything back to when you have the unconscious need to replenish the nutrient supply of your body, but you're not thinking that. You just feel hungry. And you don't have any special ways of getting around. It's mostly by leg. You walk, you run, you climb. Well, whatever is topical, whatever is local, whatever is available, you get and you use. Now, if you're out searching for food and you find something to eat, maybe some piece of fruit, your mouth starts to salivate. The digestive enzymes start to prepare to and you're not going to stop eating unless suddenly some wild animal or some predator is coming out of the underbrush to attack you. But today, with all the things on our mind, all the emotional melodramas played out through the media in a repeat cycle, with all the stresses of modern life, some of which Dr. Short mentioned, well, you can be sitting down and shoveling food into your mouth, but the body has no idea what it's supposed to do with it. You know, people used to say prayers before they became sort of ritual dogma, and people forgot what they were doing. You're trying to put your body in a receptive place where you can change solid food into biochemical energy. So if you eat some pasta or a piece of bread, if you eat that, or not a vegetable starch, almost 50% of that should be digested if it's chewed well and mixed with the tylen in the saliva. Now, besides the digestive aspects of the enzymes in the saliva, you're also sending DNA messengers down through the gut, alerting the system that food is going to be coming down, it's partially digested, and that the stomach should start to prepare to do its thing in terms of secreting digestive enzymes, and later the pancreas and the gallbladder, according to what you've eaten. But if you're busy worrying about this, and I'm like, can I pay this bill, and do they like me, and what this person doesn't love me, and all the stuff going on in the world, as I said, you may be shoveling food into your mouth, but your body's not getting the sense of it. So part of domesticating the human animal, which is what we've done, we've brought it into the wild, is establishing the patterns, the rhythms that allow it to take the most advantage of what we're putting into it and use it. Now, digestive enzymes, should we run out and get them? Not necessarily. They can be very helpful, and certainly a lot of people need them. As the body ages, there will be a diminishment of enzymes unless you take proper care of it. However, you have to remember that genetically, most people are programmed to go through a life cycle. Now, that can be augmented, altered, and bettered. But again, that's part of the domestication process. The body doesn't know how to do that. If we're smart enough to chemically uncover and trace the actions of enzymes and other components of the metabolism, then we have to direct that kind of usage in the body. More to say, but please, Dean, take it away.
Excellent. Yes. You think of all the things that we do in our life that don't contribute to digestion. I remember years ago when I had to stop and think, okay, what enzyme am I taking now? Am I going to be brushing out of the house right after this? And is it time for me to just take a small meal, or should I sit down and relax and take in the smells? When you walk into a house and you get the smell of a baked pie and the cinnamon is in the air, and don't tell me that you don't get hungry. The mechanism in your brain that says that I'm ready to eat. Well, this activation of our digestion and this important role that enzymes play in it, if you're not getting the pleasure part of your body to receive food, you're going to be pushing the nutrients out. you're not going to be breaking them down and assimilating. And very often we're deficient in these enzymes because of our lifestyle. So why are we not getting enough enzymes? And I'd like to talk to Dr. Chard about this. And Lorraine, if you have any thoughts on it, please jump in. But give me your input on how these enzymes are affecting our health and how important are they? Please.
Well, one thing I wanted to just back up a little bit. I was talking about foods that were rich in enzymes as we were coming to the break, and I don't know if people got all of that.
Please do.
If that's okay, go through that again. And then I wanted to talk about seeds, nuts, and grains for just a moment. Okay, well, let me go back to the list. Okay, foods which are rich in available enzymes include raw dairy products, raw meats, unrefined oils, raw honey, grapes, figs, avocados, dates, bananas, papayas, pineapples, kiwis, and mangoes. And it's interesting, several of these items have raw. And, of course, raw is a strong implication of available enzymes in them because when you cook things, anything that's a living form, tends to get, the word is denatured, but you could call it killed as well. It's an interesting, a little bit different consideration with grains, nuts, and legumes. These are rich in enzymes, but they also contain a substance called an enzyme inhibitor, which tends to neutralize their contained enzymes. The inhibitors were created by nature to help prevent seeds from premature germination, and they increase the demands of our digestive resources to consume them. You could grind up the seeds and make them easier to digest, but actually sprouting them specifically neutralizes the enzyme inhibitors and doubles the existing number of enzymes as well. Many seeds, including soybeans, mung beans, alfalfa, clover, sunflowers, radishes, can all be sprouted. You can buy many types of sprouts in a grocery store, or you can do your own sprouting. The process is very quick and takes only a few days for a seed to sprout to its best enzyme-rich state. I wanted to take a minute, Dean, and give a really good illustration of how important sprouting is in the therapeutic field. And as Lorraine mentioned when the show was opening, one of the products I did research for was Food Doctor. And this is a very, very interesting story. This goes back to the 1980s, early 1980s, and at the time SOD, superoxide dismutase, had been discovered, but at the time it was an extract from the liver. It was a medical prescription item, and it was basically available only in 200 international units. I knew a family personally named the Fahey's, who were a family of agriculturalists and biochemists, and they were working on that, and they discovered that there was a certain strain of wheat from India that was very, very promising for sprouting. So they spent a lot of effort sprouting this, and as a consequence of that, Food Doctor was a product that went through evolution. First of all, 250,000 international units, then 500,000, and then 1 million. So they really blew the walls off the limitation of the original liver extract type of product, and that's an exciting thing as this was going on in the 80s because there are a number of other products now available both in the enzyme field and in the non-enzyme field that are the result of some discovery in technology. But certainly the fact that any kind of sprouting seems to double the number of enzymes, it just shows you how enzymes are involved in the whole growth process, and we benefit from that nutritionally.
Right, and I just want to interject here, listeners. It is so easy to learn sprouting. You can do it on your kitchen counter. You can do it in trays on your porch, year-round, pennies per serving, all kinds of seeds and beans and so forth that you can sprout. Thank you for bringing that up, Dr. Chard, because it is a skill. It is some way that that all of us can introduce this really rich source of enzyme into our bodies and our lives is to learn simply how to sprout.
Right. Let me play the facetious advocate for a minute. What about my cheeseburger? I mean, sprouts. What is that to? And I would like to point out that...
Well, if you're in California, you just put your sprouts on your cheeseburger, I guess.
You could do that, but I wanted people to understand that they become somewhat desensitized. Yes, if that's what you want to eat, and hopefully you're eating good quality. But basically, the body is easily addicted. You know, a heroin addict does not want fresh fruits and vegetables. They want heroin. Even once you get the body used to something, it could be sugar, caffeine, anything that imbalances the body doesn't, it wouldn't seek this on its own, but you've gotten it used to it. It will crave that, even if it's to the detriment of its own health. So raw foods, sprouted foods, can be quite delicious, and something I want to point out. But if you're used to being juiced with sugar and caffeine and various substances, fried foods, heavy foods, you may say, well, gee, that's not very good. As your palate clears, you will find that these naturally rich enzymatic foods are delicious, and your body actually craves them and wants them and feels more empowered by them. But right now, most people are locked into a cycle where they're desensitized to what their own body wants and craves. Just wanted to throw that into.
Thank you, Ed.
Nope. Yeah, thank you. And it's so interesting. Oh, we're coming up on a break. Well,
yeah, and this seems to be when I lose my signal, so go ahead, Dean.
That's fine. We'll talk when we come back how the listeners can start to incorporate enzymes in their life.
Very good.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. And you, the listener, we're trying to make you aware that these tools are available, that you can use the enzymes for a variety of different things that you may not have considered before, and improve the energy, the quality of your life, your sleeping pattern, digestion, all these wonderful things. And we need to be directed on how to pick and choose. This is what I wanted to get into next with Dr. Chard, and basically the effects on our health. But even before we get there, there is some history in these enzymes and research, and it's great stuff. So please, Dr. Chard, tell us a little bit about that.
Okay, thank you very much. Probably the person who would be the father of nutritional enzyme research, certainly in the United States, but really a lot throughout the world, was Dr. Edwin Howell, who was a medical doctor from Illinois. And he did research from the 1930s through the 1970s. Probably more than 70% of what we know today about enzymes, especially from a nutritional point of view, came from the wonderful work of this man. And I'll just kind of go through some of the things that he did. He was a health-oriented medical doctor. He had in Illinois they have what's called a limited medical license. That means he didn't do surgery. He only worked with medicines, but he seems to spend most of his time in research. One of the first things he did when he became aware of enzymes was he wanted to establish if enzymes were present in all life forms and what were the relative numbers in life forms occurring in nature. So he actually, as a baseline, worked with potato bugs, and he was able to conclusively prove that young potato bugs had more enzymes than older ones. He then went on to study reptiles, birds, and mammals, and then man, and was able to show a similar situation that went on, that basically you're born with a lot of enzymes, but they tend to deplete throughout your life. And so he then conducted research of the influence of diet and enzyme levels. And one of the very interesting ones was a lot of his research was with rats, and he found that rats fed with cooked food had a pancreas 3 times as large as those who ate only raw food, and the rats eating cooked food also had shorter lifespans. The idea was that in the absence, in this particular case, a lot of it being proteases or protein digestion, since the rats didn't have it, their pancreas was swelling up because the gland was overworking to try and create more enzymes. We have somewhat the same situation with somebody's thyroid gland swelling up when you have iodine depletion. Dr. Howe came up with a maxim of the length of life is inversely proportional to the rate of exhaustion of the enzyme potential. That means the amount of enzymes stored in the body of an organism. so he encouraged the use of an increase of food-based enzymes, and found that there was a decrease in the exhaustion of enzymes. He did a lot of studies involving cooked food, and found that people had shorter lifespans, greater illness, lowered resistance to various types of stress. And as I mentioned already, not only the pancreas, but he found that other glands enlarged, and actually people's brains shrunk in size. And we know today...
I know those commercials are quite annoying. Thank you, GCN, for providing us with the opportunity to broadcast. But yes, we do have to take another break. This is our top of the hour break, gentlemen, 9 minutes. Get a glass of water, stretch your legs. Listeners, same for you. Thank you so much for being with us. We will return for the set. Good morning once again. We are here we're here on Uncommon Awareness with our twice-a-month roundtable called Evolving the Species. My co-hosts are Dean Lloyd and Am Rosen. That's Accutone.com for Dean and LifeGame.com for Am. Our guest today is Dr. Fred Shard, and he has a website, just fredshard.com. And we're just, because there's a lot of material that we still have to cover, I'm just really going to let the conversation take off. So, Dean, would you like to just get us going?
Yes, thank you again, Lorraine. Before we had the break there, we were talking about some validation with the testing that was done on enzymes present in the body. If you don't have enough of them, you're not going to live as long. You're going to have increased size of your pancreas, abnormalities, and such. So what we have to do is determine what's an appropriate, effective approach to enzymes, and we'll go there right now if we could. And I'd like to bring Am in for just a moment before I go to Dr. Shard, and that I'd like to, in priority, how important is enzymes in our digestion, Am, and where should we think of it in our place of adding supplementation?
Well, it's not what you necessarily eat, and I mean what you swallow. It's what you can break down and assimilate. I wouldn't recommend it, but if you swallowed a small piece of lead, there is nothing in your body that can break down or digest the lead, and the lead would corrode and leach into your system and further impair you. But just because you put something in your body doesn't mean that you're digesting it and getting the nutrient value. The thing is this, and I always like to interject this, because most people don't have a sense of the aging process. Up until your early 20s, you're in a state of excessive cell proliferation to allow you to grow to a full-grown person. In the early 20s, your cell proliferation starts to slow down, but you still maintain an anabolic state until about 30, which means the body is building up faster than it's breaking down. Now, you may not be digesting. You may be eating poor quality foods. You may be too excited, polluting yourself, but your body can, with the excessive cells, it's kind of like a masking device. All of a sudden, as that growth hormones start to slow down, the cells start to slow down in terms of the repair factor, you'll start to find you have problems. And the question is, what do you do about it? You mean, well, I just swallow a bunch of digestive enzymes and I'll be fine? No, they could be helped, but they're only part of the picture. Most people's bodies, because they don't know better, are usually locked into an imbalanced state. And they've been using a lot of their mental energy, which could be used much more for fun and creativity, just to pull the body along. Now, when you give the body something it needs, it wants the correct process. But if you're locked into patterns, if reinforced by your emotional behavior, where the physiology has been shut down and you give it something, well, a lot of people go into what's sometimes referred to as a healing crisis. A healing crisis means suddenly the body's trying to get rid of something or build something, and you're feeling terrible because the problems you avoided, the things you didn't handle, the shutdown in the body's functionality has to be re-encountered. The same symptoms you maybe moved away from inadvertently as a reflex are suddenly coming up again. But a healing crisis is really just a mismanaged process. So, of course, if somebody is exhausted, weary, they're not creating digestive enzymes, that's important because you have to have a nutrient flow coming into the body. But that's just the beginning of a comprehensive approach to dealing with bringing the body back into functional integrity.
Yes, and Dr. Chard, please make some, if you could, some comment about how we can, because the physiology, if we're breaking down too quickly, not being aware that we're getting enough of the nutrients out of our body and we're low on enzymes, like you'd mentioned in the first hour, how are we going to intelligently pick and choose where we direct our bodies with these enzymes? Can you give us some feedback, please?
Well, actually, just kind of a somewhat humorous way to pick up on what you're saying. I had been talking about Dr. Howell and his research from 1930 to 1970 before the break, and basically the overall upshot of what he found after many, many rat studies was that rats that ate cooked food lived about 30% shorter lifespan than those that didn't. So to equivalent that to human years, that would be 20 years or more that somebody could have of less life by eating cooked food and not having available enzymes, and as well as eating them. But kind of a humorous thing happened in his early research. In the first group of rats, Dr. Howell was puzzled because he found that the ones with cooked food were surviving as long as the ones that ate the raw diet. So he watched them very carefully, and he found that the rats were doing something that's very common for rat-like animals. They were eating their excrement. And by doing that, as I mentioned before, the enzymes aren't destroyed. They were pooping out their enzymes, and they were eating it, so they were still getting it. So he had to remove that from his testing, to clearly establish that they had a shorter lifespan. So anyway, we
I want to clue. You just answered a major conundrum for me. I took my daughter to the zoo years ago, and they had this Franklin Zoo in Boston, a really excellent gorilla exhibit, and the gorillas were eating their own excrement. And we asked, why are they? Nobody could answer that. You just answered that question. That has been a mystery in my life for a decade.
Well, that's great. There's another way that you can look at that too. Is actually the science word for that is coprophagic. But what happens is different levels of mammals have different levels of digestion. I'm sure it has something to do with enzymes. Like cows and goats, supposedly they digest only about 45% of their food. People probably digest 55 to 60%. Birds digest 85 to 90%. So birds have a very, very high digestion. Of course, they're eating seeds, which for us are more difficult to eat. Hopefully you were lucky in the zoo that in addition to eating it, sometimes they throw it. So hopefully you were spared that.
And that's a good point about assimilation, because there are substances, for example, you'd mentioned before, with non-sprouted grains, like in wheat, there's substances like phytic acid that's in the grain. If you're not sprouting, you'll get that, and it'll inhibit the absorption of minerals and nutrients. And if you sprout it, then that goes away. So, and I don't know how much of the sprouting has been part of your life, Fred, but the importance, of course, here is that we're identifying that if we're not breaking the food down, you mentioned 55 to 60%, what would it be like if we were assimilating almost all of our food? Are we chewing our food enough? Are we adding to our enzyme levels? So let's talk about upping the ante and going there for a minute. But Am, I wanted to bring you back in for just another point here. You mentioned what the body needs. Is there? Can you give me a little bit more on how we decide if we're not getting enough energy? Is our enzymes breaking the food down? But what about the quality of our food and our attitude towards our food?
Well, again, we've domesticated the animal, which means we're not just operating on an unconscious physical drive state. Nutritional replenishment is a biological survival factor. But our organs, all the metabolic processes in our body are affected either detrimentally or they're enhanced according to the quality of our feeling body and the emotional patterns we create around those. So a lot of times, unfortunately and unnecessarily, I would add, people are turned against themselves. They think wonderful thoughts, immortality, God, love, beauty, truth, eternity. But, we scratch ourselves and we bleed and we go, oh, my God, I'm mortal. I can die. And the problem that the body can be hurt, that it can be diminished, is always there. It's always an anxiety in most people because they don't understand the body. So what is it when you don't have a lot of physical energy? Then you have to waste a lot of mental energy, forcing yourself to activate the body at the level you think it should be activated at. We all have an idea of ourselves, who we are, how we should present ourselves, how we should interact. But if the physical body can't supply that vitality, the mental energy gets wasted. On the other hand, if we give the body an abundance of vitality, we bring it up to the mark and even take it beyond safely and effectively, then the mental process becomes freer to become more creative, to enjoy more, to become more quiescent according to what's needed. So most people are kind of running themselves ragged, trying to keep up with their idea of who they should be, but you need the body. So, yes, you want to digest the food. You need the enzymes to help that, but you also have to look at what the expenditure is. Input, output is the cardinal rule. There's two ways, barring accidental injury or intentional assault, there's two ways we derail the physical body on the physical level. Of course, emotions and mental processes come in. One is we don't give it enough of what it needs to perform adequately, the metabolic systems to be online. Or two, we put the wrong quality of stuff in and we, so to speak, gum up the works. We sludge it up and it doesn't perform properly. So part of it is, when I've worked with people, I could see a lot of things they need, but the body wouldn't be able to utilize them at first. So the first thing is to start to detoxify the body, quiet down the nervous system, get the digestive online, and then slowly start to introduce factors. Now, the body doesn't heal in a linear equation. You might have to say, okay, you need this, and you're going to need more of it later on, but you only need it for a limited amount. You have to see the plumbing, the electricity in the body is the same for everybody. But the emphasis is idiosyncratic. I hear the music.
That's right. It's the music. It's the first break of the second hour. Listeners, thanks for being with us. It's really an extraordinary opportunity to bring very, very, what's the word I'm looking for? Just astute and progressive individuals to the program. Thanks for being with us. We're back with Uncommon Awareness and our twice a month pieces at AM. You kind of got caught up with the last commercial break, so Dean is...
Okay, Lorraine, I didn't get all of that, but I'll just continue. Dr. Chard, there's been some numerous developments in the quality, the types of enzymes targeting different functions. Would you please elaborate why we need nutritional enzymes, or what the purpose of the enzymes are for treating things like pain or circulation issues, the things that when we were talking about digestion, breaking the food down, yes, but we can use enzymes nowadays or targeting things, even things like candiditis or candida, which is a fungus-like growth in the gut. This is a problem for a lot of people with allergies in food. So could you cover that for us?
Yes, maybe the best way I could handle that, Dean, is to just kind of paint a picture of how I look at using enzymes in my practice. I think one thing I look at overall was a really profound statement made by the famous Dr. Oz that people watch on TV in a book in 2008, and he was saying that older people are deficient in both enzymes and probiotics. So I try and look at the totality of that. I look at it from a digestive point of view, which we've already been covering to a large extent, but I also look at that from a metabolic effect in the body, and certainly dealing with candidiasis in a way can be considered like that. So in addition to the person having enough enzymes in the body, I'm also looking at, are the enzymes in their body allowed to function as they should? So a couple of nutrients I wanted to recommend that have everything to do with enzymes in the body, on whether it's metabolic, digestive, or food, is trace minerals and zinc. A lot of research has gone on with zinc, and they know that at least 72 enzyme systems work in the body because of zinc. So I look very carefully at that. Probably a very common, two very common situations I'd run into is if somebody has an infection, either on their skin or perhaps more like a cold-type infection, it just isn't resolving, and they've tried everything to do. And the other thing with zinc is just their functioning of their overall health. It's kind of like maybe there isn't an obvious illness, but there's just sort of a malaise, and they can't quite get to it. One of the things that zinc also is really important for is when Dr. Rosen had mentioned that thing that nobody wants to do if they ate some lead and the effect that would have. Well, that's heavy metal poisoning. And maybe you can eat a pencil, but also you may have an amalgam filling that's releasing that toxicity into your body. So it's tending to neutralize your enzyme system. So again, zinc is very helpful with that. The other thing along with zinc is trace minerals. A lot of people are very, very deficient in trace minerals, and you could think of trace minerals as like the spark plugs that make your enzymes work. So as a source, most of our trace minerals either come from sea vegetation or grain-type plants that have very deep root systems and are grown in healthy soil. So a good example is alfalfa. Alfalfa has very deep roots. There are some practical things that enzyme-containing products can be really helpful with in the practice and in helping people in general. And one of these that, of course, or I should say two of these that, of course, are very important digestively, but also have other important uses, is bromelain and papain, which come from papaya, and bromelain from pineapple in particular, but also from papaya. If I have a patient that's going to have some sort of a surgery, I will have them start taking bromelain supplements 10 days before their surgery. And what happens is there's a tendency to bruising in the surgery, and bromelain is very, very helpful with that. When their body reserves are built up, it will prevent that from happening, or at least reduce the amount of bruising depending on the procedure they're having. Also, both papain and bromelain are very good for weight loss. Some of the first very good weight loss products that have been out, say in the last 15 to 20 years, have involved bromelain and papain.
Excellent. And Am, could I get a little bit feedback on that?
Well, I agree with what Dr. Shard is saying. Oh dear. Well,
Am, it is just
the
the commercials are conspiring against Am this morning. Listeners, we do have to.
They're just helping us along.
That's right. We have to take another commercial break. When we come back, Am Rosen's going to answer Dean's question. Listeners, thanks so much for being with us. Dr. Fred Shard speaking on enzyme therapy, and my esteemed colleagues, Am Rosen and Dean Lloyd.
Weakened by GMO stress.
listeners, we're back with our Evolving the Species Roundtable and the conspiracy against Am Rosen to speak, the commercial conspiracy against Am Rosen. Am, go ahead. Dean had asked you a question. Why don't we just pick up where we left off?
Thank you, Lorraine. No conspiracies. No problems, just solutions on this one. But, and what Dr. Shard has been saying is good information that most people need to be aware of. But we don't exist in a physical vacuum. We're really talking about lifestyle management to some degree if we want to talk about health. Yes, of course, if you're feeling lousy and things are breaking down, you need to address those. But by the time you get to a place where you notice those things, as I said, barring injury or assault, they've been going on for a while. They've just reached the saturation point where the body can't overcompensate, and now you're starting to come up short. The cardinal rule is input-output. If the amount of energy on the physical level, if the amount of energy you're taking in physically matches what you're burning up physically, emotionally, and mentally, well, then you maintain a balance. That is if you're in balance to begin with. If not, then something has to pay for that output. And to keep up with who you think you are and how you think you're supposed to be, you'll inadvertently borrow from one metabolic system to feed the demands of another. This creates more and more of an imbalance. Now, part of the problems with enzymes comes not just from the foods we eat, but from stress. On the physical level, stress is we don't have enough energy to match our output. If you have the energy, you're just busy. But if you don't have the physical vitality, the metabolism can't keep up with our demands, then you have to drag yourself around. And you start to feel like you're separating. The mind becomes tighter, trying to force the situation. The body becomes slacker, which seems to confirm that something's wrong. All of this can be fairly easily corrected, but there's both a logic to the body, but more importantly, there's an art to application. Because in applying these things, you need to see what's off, what organs and glands aren't functioning systemically the way they need to be, but you have to look at the consciousness of the individual. What kind of emotional stresses are going on? We talk about gut emotions because regardless of what we think or what we try to avoid thinking about, everything we feel registers to the visceral organs and creates tissue disposition. As I said, you can be swallowing food, can be delicious, but you're so busy thinking about this and worrying about that, you're not really paying attention, and the body doesn't know what to make of it. So part of it, as I said, is lifestyle management.
Yeah, and Am, thank you for identifying that. We're looking at looking at where these blocks are, and digestion being such a huge part of what ails us in our American culture. We got to identify how we apply enzymes in a practical way. And when we are too stressed out, or we're too tired, we're eating too late at night, or all these different factors, this is why we make it an important part of our routine. Those of us that want to get the most out of our food, either we're doing this sprouting, which is labor, it takes work to do that kind of thing, or if we're able to direct our nutritional needs with using things like enzymes so that we're not as bogged down and we get more out of our food. And I wanted to see if Dr. Chard, could you speak to that on how we get the most out of these enzymes and how we can, it can provide us with a better opportunity to get more sleep, less pain, and get more of the quality of our daily life there?
Well, yes, I would, Dean. I'd just like to comment on what Dr. Rosen had been saying, and very supportive of his comments are there's numerous studies that show altered mental state where quite literally the body's disconnected and you're you're thinking about anything but the eating and so forth, that number one, it changes pH chemistry in the stomach, which of course is the beginning of digestion, and actually certain glands that secrete digestive substances, a lot of which are enzymes, will shut down. So he's absolutely right. If you're not quite literally focused on what you're doing, that can really happen to an individual. I wanted to take a moment for our listeners to mention a couple of books I recommend that they can see, and they can look these up online, and there'll be a description of them. And although the books were written a while back, they're still in print because they're very, very good books. The first one is the book, it's called Enzyme Nutrition, and this is actually by Dr. Edward Howell, MD, who I've been talking about. It was published in 1985. He summarizes his 30 years of research, includes many clinical studies and enzyme reaction graphs. I mean, the guy was a tireless student in terms of what he did. There's another book published in 1998. It's called The Healing Power of Enzymes, and it's by a Dr. Fuller, and I'll spell her first name. It's D-I-C-Q-I-E, and she has a Ph.D., and she's also a Doctor of Science. And she goes into a lot of practical applications of enzymes in everyday life, everything from including it for digestion, skin care, pet health, and actually metabolic typing done with enzymes. So anyway, both of these books cover a really good range of material. And one of the things I wanted to talk about was it's something I would call sort of new frontiers or special effects of enzymes, something we've kind of all been talking about, but this kind of, let's say, blew it out of the ballpark. And this is a product I became aware of about a year ago, and I've shared this with Dean, and he's benefited it also from it. And it's called serrapeptase. Now, this is a really different entrant into all of this because we've been talking about foods people eat and supplements people take. Well, serrapeptase comes from a completely different space. What that is we're all familiar with silkworms and silkworm larvae. Silkworm larvae, how they go from being a larvae into a silkworm is they're wrapped up in a tight cocoon, and their body secretes a substance called serrapeptase that breaks down this fibrin material and lets them come out and be a worm. And researchers found this, and they noted it, and it had been used in the Orient, and actually in Japan, serrapeptase is used as a prescription item for people following surgery, because what it does is, whereas it was breaking down the fibrin or these protein structures in the silkworms, it breaks down fibrin in the human body, and this is extremely far-reaching for what it does, because we have excess fibrin from everything from our arterial cholesterol plaques that cause heart attacks to if somebody's had a heavy physical trauma, that's that scar tissue they have. And in general, our body is supposed to release a substance that breaks this down, but it looks like as we get older, that's another marker of aging. It doesn't break that down anymore. And so anyway, this has been available in this country for some time, and you can look on the Internet under serrapeptase, and I'm going to spell that S-E-R-R-A-P-E-P-T-A-S-E. There's a number of companies that have the product, and it's in very, very high concentrations available, and it's fairly affordable. But I just want to mention some of the far-reaching benefits that serrapeptase has. As I mentioned already, it dissolves arterial plaque and cholesterol. It reduces pain and inflammation because a lot of pain and inflammation is caused by this fibrin material in the body. I mentioned about reducing the scarring from accidents and after surgery. It's very, very helpful with, there's a condition called chronic airway disease, and that's where somebody produces a lot of sputum and they do a lot of coughing. What serrapeptase does is it breaks down the mucus. Mucus is actually a protein structure, and serrapeptase breaks that down. So people have less coughing, and they aren't congested because their mucus has become very water-like. It's also beneficial as a conservative treatment for carpal tunnel syndrome. And a lot of people have carpal tunnel syndrome, and that involves essentially extra fibrin depositing in the connective tissue in the hand, so this breaks that down. It benefits a number of inflammatory processes in the body, including lupus erythematosus, degenerative arthritis, and rheumatoid arthritis as well. It's helped in cerebral palsy, helps with surgical pain, and actually helps with infections in general. And it's the other benefit is that many of the conditions I've listed normally would be treated with medications which have a variety of side effects, and fortunately serrapeptase has no side effects. Really the only precaution in using this item is if somebody is taking medications that thin their blood, Coumadin probably being the best known of those, serrapeptase has a similar effect, so they do need to be aware of its blood-thinning capabilities, but otherwise it's a completely safe item to use.
Excellent, yeah, and I'm glad you brought that up, because in Japan, the use of nattokinase and enzymes for heart patients is so very common. You know, Coumadin isn't, or blood thinners, or the heart medications aren't used frequently like the nattokinase, and this enzyme is more of the front, the number one go-to, therapy for heart patients. And when we're sticky in our tissues, where you're mentioning this fibrin, think of it as a scab, listeners. If you're injured somehow and you've got this sticky tissue around the injury, and it doesn't get better, in other words, you reach a plateau, you can use enzymes to break up this fibrin. Dr. Charge has mentioned about post-surgery, so you can load up on these enzymes pre and post-surgery so that you heal much more quickly. So, and then bringing this around to the X factor piece and how you just brought up something that I think we could enumerate on, and that is the distinction that most people don't know between managed sickness and real health care. If it's an emergency, by definition, emergencies make exceptions and allowances. But you don't want to live your life like it is an emergency.
That's right. That's right. Yeah, we're taking our last break of the day. We're going to be having to wrap up our program, gentlemen. Listeners, if you've missed any part of this broadcast, I encourage you to get the archive. We've really had a great opportunity to discuss enzymes. I kind of think of them as the orphan of the nutrient world, but they're making a comeback. They're finding their way home. We'll be right back. All right, we are back, and it's just unfortunate that we have to wrap up, but we do. We're wrapping up our roundtable for today, and listeners, we bring incredible individuals to this show to discuss advances in health-affirming modalities. But the ultimate goal of this program, the Evolving the Species Roundtable, is to get us to think more consciously about who and what we are, the choices we make, and how education about how things work should really ultimately lead us to better choices and a diminished need for therapeutic intervention. The therapies help, but they're really filling in where we create the holes. And so we have Am kind of taking us out of our program today by discussing with us, our relationship to, I would say, therapeutic modalities, right, Am, and how we're actually learning, or aren't we, about how to really truly take care of ourselves.
Well, it's a question, Lorraine, of mind over matter. But then you have to consider what quality, what level of perception is the mind activated from. For most people, the matter is being directed from the subconscious. Feeling processes of response that we've inherited, locked in, that have their place, but they sadly keep up with the dynamics of the time. They've never been quite suitable. There's a lot of fear, doubt, confusion interlaced in those. Those send messages to the physiology and cause it to over-respond. If something's happening, then you respond to it. But if you're sitting around worrying, full of anxiety, or you're afraid of something could happen, or it shouldn't have happened, or whatever, the body can't distinguish between what you're actually experiencing and what you're emoting, what you're thought feeling. In other words, you're bringing you're adding feelings to your thought patterns and creating emotions. And this defeats our purposes. The good side of that, the positive side, is that just as the feelings can derail the physical body if they're misdirected, once we take control of those response patterns, they're no longer subconscious, we can direct them to work with the body and enhance the functions of the body. Sometimes I tell people, okay, the body responds to simple feelings. It's like if you have a little puppy, a dog you love, you say, oh, aren't you beautiful, and you pet it. You're speaking nice. The body does not understand complex intellectual thought. That's on a whole different level. So sometimes it's kind of nice to say, I'm sorry, baby. Did I overstress you? I got you. I'm here. Don't worry. We'll turn it around. I'll find what you need. The body will respond to simple feelings, but beyond that, there are levels of consciousness. People have intonated that. Some people have made big rituals out of them, but they can be easily brought in to bring the body into a more alert, a more bioactive state that's really conducive to our health. And that requires a lot of fun explanation, but we're just giving you something to think about between now and the next show.
Great.
This is great. Yeah. Dr. Chard, I wanted to let you finish up with your closing statement on this. Bring it into focus for our listeners, please.
All right. Well, we've talked a lot about enzymes. I was talking about things that I've done in my practice with them, how I try and look at the totality of a person. And as I've tried to paint a picture, there's several different ways to consider what somebody's enzyme needs are. What I would like to do is to provide a list of what I would consider the things to look for in a good digestive enzyme supplement. This is what you would look for. First of all, protease, lipase, amylase, and then there's glucoamylase, lactase, invertase, cellulase, hemicellulase, beta-glucanase, phytase, galactosidase. Yeah, that's a mouthful. Anyway, these items are in a very important array for a health food item. And in supplements, the original ones came from like animal products. Like a good example, you can still buy supplements for ox bile, and of course that's going to help you digest your gallbladder material. But they're grown in bioculture now, so there's a lot of variety of very good digestive enzymes. Thank you.
Thank you. Hey, gentlemen, thank you so much. Dr. Fred Chard, thank you for being with us today. I really enjoyed what you had to share with us. Listeners, you can just go to fredchard.com to learn more about his practice and his recommendations. Dean and Am, always a true pleasure to do this show with you.
Had fun with you, Lorraine. Thank you.
Listeners, have a wonderful day. We are on Monday morning with Rosalind Peters talking about the dolphin beachings that are going on. Lots going on in the environment that we need to know about. Thank you for being with us today. Have a wonderful weekend. See you Monday morning.